Hello ladies and gentlemen of YouTube, my name is Brad, this is my channel Adamant Orange, and welcome to part 3 of the USS Missouri build, where we're going to finish up what I've started. In the last video, in part 2, we finished off the back half of the main deck, I believe you might refer to it as. We're going to switch to the front half, and things are going to really start coming together at the end of this video, and we will finish this awesome model. So let's get back into it. I had an unusually difficult time getting the flag and pole on and connected. For some of these gun sections, I used one pair of tweezers to hold things down while I twisted the tabs with another pair. You will have to get a bit creative when shaping part 107 and 108. It is so thin, it wants to bend in places it shouldn't. I had to hold the main parts with tweezers and pick at a couple of parts to be bent with my fingernails. It was very challenging. This is where things really start to come together. And as a reminder, there are a lot of duplicate parts in this build, so rather than showing you the same steps over and over and over again, I'll show you one, maybe 2 times, and just kind of skip ahead with the build and just show where I'm connecting that already assembled part. So if it looks like maybe I'm skipping steps, it's just me not wanting to show you the same thing over and over again. I'm not going to turn out the propellers just yet. I will wait to do that when things are assembled to keep from accidentally bending it back and forth and breaking them off. The instructions say to fold these tabs, but I believe twisted tabs would be more secure. To start with, I am twisting the 2 centerish tabs to hold things in place while I get other tabs lined up and folded over. I will then come back and untwist and fold these starter tabs over. Sometimes it takes multiple attempts to get our parts to fit together, adjustments and retries, and I don't always show every single step, and I do that to kind of keep the video flowing along. So bear in mind, it may make it look like some of these parts come together easier than they actually did, but it does take a fair amount of patience and trial and error to get parts to fit together. I started off bending part 117 backwards, but caught myself. It occurs to me at this point that I probably should have put the engraved side facing up or inward so that the bottom looks smooth, but, well, after 8 hours, what's done is done. I didn't want to try and take off the 4 parts I had just added, so I decided this would be my personal flair. The last part turned out to be quite a pain. First, I needed to spend some time shaping the bow of the ship to the correct shape, and then I had to carefully place the small part in its place and maneuver the tabs to line up. It was a bit of a tight fit. That's one tab. One to go. and after some struggle, I finally got the other tab in place. At this point, I am thinking I'm done and it's time to go around and straighten things up, when I realize I never did add that third turret. Good thing it's not that hard thing to fix. And I present to you, all finished and done, the rather sizable ICONX U.S.S. Missouri build. This is awesome. I love the size of this model. I had hoped that it would be a sizable model, and I am not disappointed. This is great. I love it. This thing took me 8 hours to build. There is a lot of detail and a lot of little parts. It's really not terribly challenging. It is a challenge. It's listed as a challenge. It is a challenge in large part for the patience aspect of it. But as far as forming a lot of the shapes, it's mostly a patience sort of thing. The shapes on this thing aren't terribly complicated. There are a fair amount of guides for the unusual railings and sidewalls that go in unusual shapes. There are some guides on the instructions to help you find the right shape. There's a little bit of a challenge in forming like these sort of chimney area back here and this section up here. But it's not terrible. It is, in my mind, I kind of compare this to Iron Man. In my mind, I kind of compare this in difficulty to Iron Man, because Iron Man is another model that really surprised me. It was a complex model and it took a lot of time, but it was well worth the effort, which is just like the Missouri. And let's talk about that in just a little bit, because One of the things I guess you could judge these models by their complexity is part numbers. Now, with the USS Missouri, the highest part number is 121. A lot of those parts are duplicate parts. The USS Missouri has a lot of guns, a lot of these there's 3 of these large guns, there's a lot of these medium-sized guns, there's a lot of smaller medium-sized guns, little bitty guns. There's a lot of duplicate parts. These chimney pieces, like 2 of those. There's 2 of these, there's 2 of that. There's a lot of duplicate parts, and while it's not impossible to count every duplicate part, it is a bit challenging. Essentially, there are at least 170 unique parts to the USS Missouri. So there's a lot of parts, and that's a lot of why it takes a full 8 hours to build. It is not highly challenging, but it just takes a long time. Iron Man, on the other hand, is not as large of a model, but at the time when I built this, it was considerably larger than a lot of the other figures, or any of the other figures that Metal Earth had at the time. And this is a very complex model with a lot of parts as well. Not quite as many as the Missouri. It's not as big. Iron Man has 85. Its highest number in its part sheet is 85. And there are a number of duplicates because left side, right side, left side, right side. So if you add up the duplicates, it's basically somewhere between 95 and 100 parts to build this model. I'm not precisely sure. That's a rough guesstimate because I'm probably, no matter how many times I try to count, I'm probably going to either overcount or miscount 1 or 2 pieces here and there. Iron Man was an awesome model, and it is very challenging to shape the body parts of Iron Man. So comparing this really awesome model of Iron Man to this really awesome model of the USS Arizona, for instance, Iron Man is very challenging. It does have a lot of parts, but it's also a lot of challenge to shape the unusually shaped parts. They're not perfectly round. You can't just use a dowel rod or a drill bit to shape everything. There's some customization to it. Body parts aren't perfectly even. It's more of a challenge to build. The USS Missouri, a lot of things are square, a lot of things are more evenly rounded, and it is still a challenge, but it's not as difficult to challenge to shape it, to shape the parts of it as it is to shape the parts of Iron Man. It's more of a challenge of getting all these many parts together in some of the tight spaces. So, it's not an even keel. It is challenging. It is a challenging model, but it's challenging for different reasons. It's challenging because it's so many parts and so much small detail, and you have to take your time getting some of those parts bent correctly. Whereas, say, the challenge of something like Iron Man, a War Machine, the challenge is a lot of small parts, but very much in shaping the unusual natural shapes, more natural shapes of those parts rather than the boxy, squarish, or circular shapes of something like the Missouri. And that's just been a mess of stuff that's in my head when I'm looking at the two, because I'm thinking of how awesome this model is. The Missouri really has left an impression on me, to the likes of Iron Man, to the likes of the Black Knight from Peace Corps. They were just really awesome models to put together that ended up being so much more than I expected, larger than I expected, more detail than I expected, and I'm just completely blown away. I am absolutely loving this model. The more I talk about it, the more excited I get. The only downfall, and I've already had one person mention this already, is that these guns don't all want to point in the same direction, and that's a little bit annoying. I could throw some glue on there and fix it, but I'm just going to leave it as it is. It's not terrible, really not terrible, because these things never turn out perfect. Wow, there's just so much detail. It's just bravo Fascinations. That's just absolutely amazing. It's going to get more and more difficult to top these models if you keep putting out awesome stuff like that, but I'm going to keep getting them and building them. And just as a little bit of a comparison, here is the USS Arizona model that I built some time back. Another battleship that is unfortunately sitting on a bit of a ocean floor as a memorial now. And this rather large ICONX model. That's how awesome it is. Look at the size difference there. That just wow. Just absolutely wow. And on a bit of a side note, I have never set foot on the Arizona. I have never served in any kind of military capacity. My life just didn't go that way, considered it, but that's another story. I have been on the USS North Carolina, being a North Carolina native. If you haven't noticed from the accent, I'm from the southeast of the United States. I have been to the USS North Carolina, which is a memorial now in Wilmington, North Carolina, that you can still to this day go to and explore. Been there a couple of times, got pictures here and there. It is very similar to this ship right here. So putting this together is kind of exciting, kind of a trip down Memorial Lane, because I have been inside these large cannons as well as these medium-sized cannons. I have walked on a very similar deck and seen the guns on display. I have seen and have somewhere in my collection a picture of these little tiny looking chains here that are enormous. My friend, I have a picture of my friend at the time who went with me sitting on those chains, and they're just massive. I can't even show you in the scope of the camera here how massive those chains really are. But just, it was kind of a fun trip down memory lane, and it is exciting to see, for me, this kind of military stuff, these ships, these boats, these technology. Some part of it is exciting to me. So that was another bonus. This is one of the models. While I haven't seen this one directly, and I've said many times, building these models allows me to see details that I wouldn't see otherwise because I haven't been to that in person. I've been to something very similar. So it's a little bit of a different experience, not being shown stuff that I wouldn't normally see, but being reminded of stuff that I have actually seen. So kind of cool there. I like to show my own 360-degree view of the completed model once I'm done, but this ship is just too big to fit on that little spinny display. So I had to be a little creative and do some custom shots. And I will stop jabbering on and leave it at that. As always, thank you for watching. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them down below. If you would like to support this channel, consider becoming a Patreon supporter. There will be a link in the description down below and at the end of this video. As always, thank you for watching, and keep on keeping on.